In this lesson, we will see the new input types in HTML5. HTML5 has brought new input types which bring better input control and more user interactivity. The new input types are written the same way as the normal input types. The only thing that we need to change is the value of the type attribute. So first, let's create a form element, and the first new input type will be the color input type. To set the color input type, set the value of the type attribute to color. So this input is used to choose a color using the default color palette of the operating system. So you will get the same palette you usually get when you use the Paint tool in Windows to choose a color. And here we have set some text so we can know what kind of input, and a breaking line so that the new inputs will be shown on new lines. So the next input type we will insert is the date input type. The date input type allows the user to pick up a date. This is very helpful, especially in registration pages when the user needs to select his birthday. So let's set the text to pick up. The next input type in HTML5 is the date time input. So let's create another input element, and as value in the type attribute type datetime, and another one is the datetime local. As value type datetime minus local. The difference between these two is that with the datetime local we can choose the date and time without the time zone, and with the datetime type input we can choose the date and time with a time zone. So after inserting the inputs, make sure to set the text to datetime and datetime local, so that we recognize them later in the browser. So make sure to set the proper value in the type attribute, datetime and datetime minus local. The next input type is the email input, which of course it is used to set an email in this input type. So it is similar to the text input type. The only difference, when this form is submitted to the server validates the input as email. So if you don't type a valid email inside the email input type, the form won't be submitted. And also, if the page is visited from a mobile device, when the user focuses to the email input type, the keyboard will show the @ sign on the main page of the keyboard, so that the user can enter the email faster. And also make sure to set the text before the input so you can recognize it in the browser. The next input type is the month input type, which is of course used to select a month and a year. You just need to set the input type to month and also set a text before the input element. The next input type in HTML5 is the number input type, which is of course used to input a number. It is similar to the text input. The only difference is that when the form is submitted to the server will validate the input as number. So if you don't have a number inserted in the input, the form won't be submitted. There are another two attributes that are useful in the number input type, and those are the min and max, which are used to set the minimum number value and the maximum number value. And also make sure to set a text before the input type. The next input type is the range input type. So as value in the type attribute, set range. The range is a slider in which you can move it, and as you slide, the value is changing. Same as the number type, we can use the minimum and maximum value to set the minimum and the maximum value of the slider. So in this example, let's set it the minimum to 10 and the maximum to 100. And again, make sure to set a text before the input. The next input type we have in HTML, in HTML5, is the search input type. To set the search input, make sure to set the type value of the type attribute to search. So this shows a search field in the browser. It is similar to the text input type, but this one it is used to search results in your browser. The next input type we have is the TL type, which is used to set a telephone number in the input. Moving on, the next input type we have is the time input type, which is used to select the time without the time zone. Just make sure to set the value of the type attribute to time, and also set a text before the input. The next input type is the URL input type, which is used to insert a URL, a website link, in the input. And when this input is submitted to the server will validate as a link. So if you don't insert a link in the URL input type, the form won't be submitted. The last input type is the week input type, which is used to select a week and a year without a time zone. So make sure to set the value of the type attribute to week. And now let's see the results in the browser. So here we have our new HTML5 input types in the browser. The first one, the color input type. When we click it, we get the default system color picker, which we can use to select a color. The second input type is the date input type, which is used to pick up a date. We can either type our own or select from the calendar. So we can either set the date manually or by just using the calendar element, which is accessible by clicking on the drop down icon. The next one is the date and time input, which it is used to set the date and time. The next one is the date and time again, but this time to set the local without a time zone. Then we have the email type, which is same as the text input, but this one is validated as email when submitted to the server. And if you visit this kind of form on your mobile device, when you focus on this type of input, the keyboard will show the @ and .com key on the main page of the keyboard, so you can insert the email faster. The next input is the month input, which is used to select the month and the year. The next one is the number type input, which is used to set the number type. And as you can see, as we have limited the number, we can only insert the maximum allowed number. We can also insert the number manually, but when it's submitted to the server, it won't be submitted. The next one is the slider, the range input type, and as you can see, currently we don't see any values. That's because with some JavaScript we need to get that value. The next one is the search, and as you can see, as we type on the right side, we get an X sign, which is used to delete the search we have typed, same as most of these search engines. The next one is the telephone input type, which is used to insert a telephone number, and it is validated as a telephone number when submitted to the server. The next one is the time input type, which is used to set the time without a time zone. We can either insert it manually or by just going up and down. The next is the URL input type, which is same as the text input type, but this one is used to insert a link, and it is validated as link when submitted to the server. And the last input type is the week input type, which is used to select a week and a year. You can do that by inserting manually or by just going up and down or selecting from the calendar. So these are all the new input types we have in HTML5, and as you have noticed, some of them are very similar to the text input element. That's because maybe some of these input types are not yet implemented in the browsers, and if some input type is not supported by the browser, the text input type is used as the default one. So your browser might not support some of these input types, because as I said in the beginning, HTML5 is still not supported fully by the browsers, and some features are still need to be implemented in the browsers. So that's all for this tutorial lesson about the new input types in HTML5.